Hello everybody and welcome to the Online Sociologist. I'm Ryan. In this video, we're continuing our deep dive into the work of the German sociologist Georg Simmel using the 1950 collection, The Sociology of Georg Simmel, which was edited and translated by Kurt Wolff. And we're beginning a new part of Simmel's project, which is part 2 of the book called The Quantitative Aspects of the Group. In this video, as well as future ones, focus on a simple question with huge consequences. What changes when a group is small, and what changes when it becomes large? So, if you've been enjoying this series and want to keep following along, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave a comment below. In previous videos, we saw how Simmel treats social life as a field of tension between the group and the individual, between stability and change, between what's shared and what's unique. Now Simmel turns to something even more fundamental: numbers. Not as statistics, but instead as a force that shapes the very form of social life. As Simmel puts it, he wants to examine social life in one respect only: the bearings which the mere number of associated individuals has upon its forms. In other words, he isn't asking what groups believe or what they're trying to accomplish. Instead, he's asking, what does the number of members make possible? What does it prevent? And how does size reshape the feel of social life? This video introduces those big themes by focusing on two broad forms: small groups and large groups, and how they shape the way that people relate to one another. Let's start with small groups. Now, Simmel never defines small with a specific number. He isn't giving us a cutoff like 3, 5, or 10. Instead, he asks a different question. How does a group operate when the number of members is small enough for everyone to be visible? For Simmel, small groups are built through immediate relationships. People see each other. They recognize each other. No one disappears into the background. Because of that, each person matters. If someone leaves, the whole group feels it. This closeness shapes everything: decision-making, trust, conflict, loyalty. Nothing can be pushed off into impersonal procedures or delegated to institutions. A small group lives and dies through the relationships themselves. But smallness also works through contrast. Many small groups define themselves by standing apart from something larger. Think of religious communities that set themselves against mainstream society, or elite circles that preserve their identity by remaining exclusive. The group's smallness becomes part of its meaning because it draws a boundary against the outside world. And one quick note here: Simmel has much more to say about specific kinds of small groups, especially the dyad and the triad. Now, these groups are so important that we're going to dedicate separate videos to them later. Here though, we're just setting the stage by looking at small groups in the broadest sense. Groups where everyone can relate directly and where structure grows out of personal ties. Now, let's shift to the other end of the spectrum and look at large groups. Large groups, or what Simmel sometimes calls the mass, are defined not just by size, but what size does. Once a group becomes too large for everyone to know one another personally, intimacy gives way to mediation. Direct relationships are replaced by structures such as rules, roles, offices, symbols, and procedures. This doesn't make large groups bad or unnatural. It just means they operate differently. In small groups, unity comes from personal ties. In large groups, unity comes from form, or from shared institutions and simple, universal expectations that everyone can follow. And Simmel notices something really interesting here. Because large groups are so diverse and anonymous, they're often moderate in everyday life. The differences among members cancel each other out. Nobody feels deeply invested, so the group drifts towards the middle. But there's also another side, and one that we've discussed in previous videos. When a large group does get stirred into action, it's usually by something blunt and simple, or an idea that anyone can understand immediately. Simmel writes that, quote, "What is common to all must be accessible even to the lowest and most primitive among them," unquote. Now, he's not using primitive here as an insult, but instead as a structural point. If an idea is going to move a massive diverse crowd, it can't be subtle or complex. This is why slogans spread faster than arguments, why movements rally around short emotional phrases, why large groups respond to the simple more easily than the nuanced. So, this is the dual nature of large groups. They tend to be moderate most of the time, but when they do move, they move with dramatic force, because the idea that unites them is stripped to its most basic, emotionally charged form. So, what does Simmel want us to see? Small groups give us closeness, identity, and meaning, but they're fragile. They depend on personal relationships, which can deepen, but can also break. Large groups give us stability and reach, but they create distance between their members. They need rules and structures that apply to everyone, even when they don't fit individuals perfectly. It's a trade-off built into social life itself. The more a group relies on intimacy, the less it can grow. And the more it grows, the less intimate it becomes. This is why Simmel insists that numbers aren't just a detail. They're a form-giving force. They shape how we cooperate, how we lead, how we feel connected, and even how we define ourselves. So, let's recap what we covered. Simmel argues that the number of people in a group doesn't just add bodies, it changes the very structure of social life. Small groups run on direct relationships, large groups run on mediated structures. Small groups are cohesive but fragile, large groups are stable but impersonal. And this tension between closeness and scale shapes everything from identity to cooperation to the ways that groups think and act. Now, if you start looking for it, you're going to see this pattern everywhere, in workplaces, classrooms, political movements, religious communities, even in the friend groups that you've been part of. So, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, complaints, or critiques, feel free to leave a comment below. And if you want to keep exploring Simmel's thoughts, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the upcoming videos, especially the ones on the dyad and the triad. I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.